guys, I'm Ahana and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be sharing how I got into Y Combinator with a 4-day-old idea. If you want to see how I did it, then keep on watching. This story starts back in the summer after my 3rd year of university. I've just finished an investment banking summer internship and I was getting ready for the master's year ahead of me. I've always done loads of extracurriculars and activities, but I knew due to COVID that they probably wouldn't run in the same way that they had before. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and knew that I'd wanted to work on a project, but never really had the opportunity to, and I felt that this was the perfect timing. I'd had a couple of friends that I'd spoken to over the course of my degree about maybe working on something in the future. So I called them up. I didn't really have an idea, but we decided that we could try something. At the time, my co-founder Ben had just spent a year at MIT doing his master's, and he'd actually taken an entrepreneurship course. In that course, they used a textbook called Disciplined Entrepreneurship, and as physicists, we like discipline and we love textbooks. I've linked it in the description box below. Essentially, it's a 24-step guide on how to build a startup from the ground up. It was especially helpful for first-timers like us because it helps you benchmark things like your TAM and your LTV to CAC ratio. Step 1 of Disciplined Entrepreneurship is to brainstorm, I think it was 100 ideas. We came up with about 97 absolutely terrible ideas, maybe 2 okay ideas, and 1 idea that we thought was pretty good. The idea that we liked actually stemmed from none of us wanting to take notes during the meeting. So at this time, we came up with Quill. Quill was a software that automated the process of taking meeting minutes. It provided a transcript, a summary, and data insights from your meetings. Well, it tried to. Whether it succeeded is a different question. As we were going through the steps of disciplined entrepreneurship and really just starting on our startup, Ben had mentioned that it was the Y Combinator application season. And I'd heard about Y Combinator, but I was always under the impression that it was for experienced entrepreneurs, or at least people that were a little further along in their entrepreneurial journey. However, I tend to be quite the opportunistic person, so I decided, let's just put an application in anyway. My co-founders were so convinced that nothing would come of it that they didn't even read the application.
We actually didn't read it. I never read that application.
Thankfully, the amount of cover letters I've written and applications for internships that I've done, I'm alright at filling in long forms and trying to sell myself on a piece of paper. So I went ahead and did that. The key skill there is that I knew how to verbalize things concisely and clearly, and I think that really helped us on the YC application. About a month went by since we'd submitted our YC application, but at the time we were far too busy being distracted by some VCs, and I might actually film a video on this at another time. One day, first thing in the morning, we received an email back from Y Combinator informing us that we'd been invited to interview. I honestly don't think any of us could actually believe that this had happened. We were so sure that we wouldn't even make it that far. Fortunately for us, we had 2 months from the time that we found out we had the interview to actually having the interview. So the first thing we did was speak to some YC alumni just to understand a little bit more about the interview. The first alumni we spoke to, I don't think was particularly impressed by us. To summarize, his feedback to us was just to get off our backsides and launch as soon as possible. We took this very literally, upped the tempo, and got to work. The 2 things that we did really well were build the first version of Quill and do a load of customer discovery calls. By the time the YC interview had rolled around, we'd launched 15 unpaid pilots at various companies. Ben and I prepared a lot for the YC interview. We asked ourselves some difficult questions about our business and really tried to envision what the worst thing they could ask us could be and make sure that we were prepared and had an answer. In particular, we highlighted the weak points of our business and made sure that we had answers for all the difficult questions. As an aside, this interview happened in our second to last week of term, so we were still students at this point, and we'd asked all our professors if we could push our deadlines into the final week of term just because we were so busy with this interview and with Quill, and they were really understanding, and we thought, you know what, we will have so much time next week, we will definitely be able to hit all of our deadlines. Remember this for later. Our interview was 10 minutes with 3 interviewers and very few pleasantries. We prepared for most of the questions they asked and were able to answer every question. We weren't too sure how it had gone. They really don't give much away in the interview itself. Following our interview, there was a bit of back and forth via email about whether we were still students, and they actually wanted to see a demo of Quill. Normally, YC invites interviewees to San Francisco, and the interviews run on Pacific time. However, due to COVID, we were doing our interview from London. Around 4 in the morning, we receive a long email back from one of our interviewers. It essentially said that they liked our team, but they didn't love the idea. They said that they'd seen previous companies attempt to tackle a similar problem, but for whatever reason had never really taken off, and we were too early stage for them to know if our approach was that different from previous companies' approach to solving this problem. They suggested that we reconvene in a week's time and do one of two things: come up with something better or get more traction on Quill. In short, we did both. To be clear, we didn't really have a solid backup idea when we got this email, so we were absolutely exhausted and we spent a bit of time feeling sorry for ourselves. But very soon after, we got right back into action. Ben and I made a very detailed plan for the next 7 days, down to the hour. We built a strategy to gain more traction with Quill, but also to get a new idea off the ground. Our second YC interview was on a Friday, and we'd scheduled our brainstorming session for the Tuesday, just 4 days before our YC interview. During this brainstorming session, it was actually when I took a break and went to my room to grab something, and I passed by my array of skincare items that I realized I actually have a lot of unique insights into this problem, having suffered with acne for such a long time. In particular, I'd always found it really hard to know, firstly, which products to use and whether they're actually working. It was at this point that Hout was born. In those 4 days for Hout, we built a landing page which we drove around 200 people to, and I did around 60 customer discovery interviews. The next big challenge was that we needed to build a prototype. Now, remember I said this was our last week of term? Well, unfortunately, we had a couple deadlines this week, and we're really only free to do that on the Friday itself. So, after all the deadlines had passed, at 12 PM, we got to work on building our prototype. From 12 PM to 8 PM, we worked on building the prototype. Then, from 8 PM till 10 PM, I did 4 demos of the app itself, and then the interview was at 10:30. Concurrently, we were doing some more work on Quill. We launched on Product Hunt, on Hacker News, and we're still trying to get more pilot programs running. Our second interview was quite different from our first interview. It went on for nearly an hour, the pace was much slower, and we discussed both Quill and Hout. We did feel that this one went better, but it ended with our interviewer saying to reach out if we had any questions. We were so confused. Had we just been rejected? Were we still waiting to hear back? We didn't really know what to do, so frantically I went to my email, opened my inbox, and started drafting out an email pretty much asking where we stood. As I was frantically writing this out, I saw in my inbox an email from the interviewer pops up literally 2 minutes after we'd just finished speaking. The email was very short and was just our interviewer asking if we were still on the Zoom call and whether she could hop back in. And when she did, it was to break the good news. She went over some of the details, and that was it. We got into YC with our 4-day-old idea. We really couldn't believe it. It was close to midnight and our university had officially broken up for the winter break, but we emailed Imperial to officially put in our interruption of studies, and from the very next day, got to work on our startup. I hope you enjoyed this story time. It truly was a wild ride, but we're so grateful for the opportunity, and all our hard work really did pay off. If you're interested in hearing more about YC, whether that's application tips or our experience, or even meeting some of our YC batchmates, comment down below and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.